The other reason why it's important to answer the summons and complaint is you're entitled in most cases, especially, well, if it's a subprime loan, if your mortgage falls in a certain category of subprime criteria, you have a right to a court-supervised settlement conference. And that settlement conference is important because here it is, the bank has stopped accepting your payments, your house is moving toward the auction. When you go for the settlement conference, you come with your financial documentation that you can't afford to pay the mortgage, and you do that under the supervision of the court. And the chances are much better at that time of working out some kind of agreement with the bank under the supervision of the court. Because when you try to do a settlement on your own with the bank, they're very hard-nosed about it. But when you do it through the court system under the supervision of the court, the bank knows that the court is watching. Your chances of reaching some kind of agreement to get out of foreclosure are much greater by you taking advantage of that mandatory settlement conference, which can only take place at the beginning of the foreclosure process. Once your foreclosure goes into judgment, that settlement conference option is by and large over, although there are cases where you can still get a settlement conference, but it's much harder to do that under the supervision of the court after the case goes into foreclosure, a judgment rather. So again, it's important to take action when you get the summons and complaint. And let's look at the two options. Really what you should do is hire a lawyer. But again, there are people that learn how to do this on their own. It's not that difficult. It's really a question of learning how to prepare the legal paperwork to go into court. There are legal aid lawyers that you can use. In fact, you should go right into court when you get the summons and complaint. Queens County Court and practically every court in the state has counselors there that can help you find a lawyer if you can't afford one, or they'll suggest alternatives. And then, of course, if you like, you can order our book, The Stop Foreclosure Auction Toolbox, which will walk you step by step through the entire process of going into court and mounting your own defense on your own. It's called pro se, meaning you go into court on your own. It takes a little bit of study, but it can be done. And again, we guide you step by step through the whole process. So you go into court with a lawyer. Well, let's talk about why people don't like to hire lawyers. I mean, people have a situation where their house is in foreclosure. They get the summons and complaint, which is a lot of technical legal paperwork. Most people set it aside and they just wait to see what happens next. The right thing to do is go see a lawyer, but the problem with that is, in many cases, people feel they don't have the money to hire a lawyer. A lawyer is going to charge you about $3,000 or $4,000 to take a foreclosure case on. It's worth it because you are able to exercise your rights and protections under the law. However, people in many cases don't trust lawyers. If you don't know what you're doing, if a person feels they don't know anything about the process and they go to a lawyer, they feel the lawyer's going to charge whatever they want and maybe do a good job or not. So that's why people hesitate. But if you feel that you don't have the money for a lawyer, or you feel that you don't trust lawyers, we suggest you go on the internet or purchase our book and learn how to do this yourself. There's a lot of information out there about going into court on your own. And in fact, once again, our book will tell you how to do that step by step. So, whether you hire a lawyer or not, you go into court. Now, the interesting news is that with all the defects that that are in the paperwork that's been submitted around the country, states around the country are investigating the banks for submitting this sloppy paperwork. Attorney generals around the country have opened cases against banks, and practically every state in the nation. And that's, again, why the foreclosure process has really slowed down. The banks are trying to get their paperwork in order. But if you're in foreclosure now, chances are you have a lot of defects in that paperwork. If you take a look at your mortgage and see that mortgage electronic registration systems is involved in your mortgage, that means you have a very, very strong likelihood of being able to go into court and really give the foreclosing bank a hard time. In fact, you have a possibility of getting the foreclosure action dismissed, and where the bank will have to start all over again. The other important point to remember is that this is something you'll have to learn how to do. So when you get that summons and complaint, don't set it aside. Make a plan of action, whether it's to hire a lawyer or whether it's you're going to study your options and rights, or whether you're just going to take a walk or take the bus or drive down to the courthouse and ask them what to do. But do something. Don't just do important. I know you're under a lot of stress and you don't know where to turn or what to do, but do something. Either get a lawyer, go to the court, or buy our book and start finding out how to challenge this. Do it right away. Don't wait. Now let's talk about what happens when your house is now ready to be auctioned. The foreclosure process is taken. The bank has gone through the court process, and they've reached the point where they're ready to auction your house. Does that mean that all of your options are over? No, not at all. In fact, from the time that that auction is scheduled, if you know what you're doing, you can delay the foreclosure process easily by a year, and in some cases up to 2 years. And why would you want to delay the process? Well, obviously, if you have more time in your home, you have more time to fix the problem. If you've been laid off, for example, now you have more time to find a job. If you need time to move, now you have extra time to find a new place to live and get yourself together to move out. So what the very important point we're making now is, even if the house is about to be auctioned, you can do things to delay that process. Let's talk about the two options that you have. The two main options are, one, by filing a chapter. If your house is about to go to auction, you can stop the auction by filing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. It's a few papers that you have to fill out, and once you file that bankruptcy, the auction must be stopped. Now, typically, when you take that route, when you file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, if you file just the bare minimum of paperwork, you'll get about 6 to 8 months more time in your house. And guess what? You can file 2 of them in 1 year. So, for example, you have an auction schedule for, today is Monday, you have an auction schedule for Friday. You go into the bankruptcy court on Thursday afternoon and file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. That Friday auction will be canceled, and it will remain canceled until that bankruptcy is dismissed. And again, if you file the minimum paperwork, it could take up to 6 months easily for that bankruptcy to be dismissed. So then another couple of months goes by, and the bank schedules another auction. When that happens, you can file another bankruptcy. So you can file up to 2. And the other issue to remember is that if both husband and wife are on the mortgage or are on the deed, each of them can file up to 2 bankruptcies. So on the first bankruptcy, you might get 6 months, 7 months. On the second one, it's less time because they're a little more strict on the second filing. You might get maybe 3 or 4 months, or as little as 2 to 3 months. So we're talking almost a year for one person filing 2 bankruptcies. That was the husband. Now the wife comes along. When the auction comes, she goes and files a bankruptcy. And then the next auction, she files another one. You've just bought almost 2 years in your house by filing the bankruptcies. And again, that may give you the time to get your act together and save your home in another way. You might be able to work out a loan modification, or you might need time to do a short sale, or you really need to make more money. If you can't afford your mortgage, maybe you'll have time to get that second job, or start making one of your children who's living in the attic pay rent, whatever. Time is good because it gives you options. So bankruptcy, Chapter 13 bankruptcy is one option for delaying the mortgage process. And you can do that at any time. Generally, people will do that right before the auction. And that's not something you would do right after you get a summons and complaint. Now, let's talk about the second option for delaying or extending the foreclosure process. The second option is going into court to challenge the foreclosure process, to find the defects and get the foreclosure lawsuit delayed or dismissed. Just by going into court, you're going to get a few months of delay. However, if you're one of those people that did nothing and your home your foreclosure case went into judgment and your house is about to be auctioned, At that time, you can also go into Supreme Court and file what's called an order to show cause with a temporary restraining order. Again, generally speaking, you need a lawyer to do this. A lawyer will charge $2,000 or $3,000 to go into court to stop an auction with an order to show cause. Again, we show you exactly how to do this in our book, The Stop Foreclosure Auction Toolbox. You can buy that book, and it walks you step by step through exactly how to file the Chapter 13 bankruptcy paperwork, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it. In fact, you even get sample forms that are filled in that show you exactly how to put the Chapter 13 bankruptcy paperwork together. Of course, that's the initial paperwork just to stop the auction. Same is true with the order to show cause. If your house is about to be auctioned and you've done your 2 bankruptcies, for example, so you have no more option with the bankruptcy, you can then go into court with an order to show cause, and provided that you have good defenses. For example, if we find that the bank has made mistakes in the way they are handling your foreclosure lawsuit, right before the auction, you can go into court with that order to show cause and have that auction postponed. And again, it takes a little expertise to do that. You have the choice of hiring a lawyer at $2,000 or $3,000. You also have the option of purchasing our book, or you can go into court and see if you can find legal assistance from some of the agencies that help people that don't have the money to hire a lawyer. But when you file that order to show cause and the judge signs it, that auction is stopped. That will give you about 6 months. If the defects in the bank's foreclosure paperwork are serious, the entire foreclosure case may be dismissed even after judgment, although again, it's much harder to dismiss after judgment. But the point I'm making is that from the time of your first scheduled auction, you can easily extend the foreclosure process by 1 or 2 years. I mean, you'll have to do some work, but you can buy that amount of time. So it might have taken 1.5 years to get to the point where your house is now going up for auction. You can add another 2 years to that, and that's a significant thing, because when people first get that notice that they're in foreclosure, they go into panic and they feel, well, I'll be out of my house soon. One of the things we want to do is try to relieve your stress by educating you to the fact that even if you've done nothing and your house is about to be auctioned, if you take the right steps, you can extend that process by another 1 or 2 years. So let's say that it took 1.5 years. You got the notice of summons and complaint. You now it's going to take a good 1 year to 1.5 years or even more for it to reach the point where they can sell your house at auction. And again, the bank has to go through this entire legal process in the state of New York or any judicial state before they can sell your property. So then, so it's taken 1.5 years, and now if you take the right steps, you can stretch it out another 1.5 years to 2 years. So from the time you get that summons and complaint, you might still be in your house for another 2 or 3 years. So you don't have to panic. What you have to do is start educating yourself and learning your legal rights and how to exercise them. Get involved in the process. Go stop by the court. Every court has an office to help people who don't have attorneys. The courts now have a lot of referral services where they might refer you to a legal aid type attorney. And again, you can go online. There's a tremendous amount of information online about defending foreclosure cases. And of course, an easy way to do this is just order our book, where we walk you step by step through the whole process of preparing a foreclosure defense, preparing an order to show cause to stop an auction. But the good news is that if you learn about your rights, you can really extend that process, buy a lot of time, and look for other remedies to get out of foreclosure. So that's our show for today. We're going to continue on this topic and go into more detail about exactly how to defend against a foreclosure case in court.